In this video, I've done a lot of videos about ride sharing on this channel. It started out as a ride sharing channel. I do want to talk about the 5 biggest reasons why being an Uber driver and a Lyft driver is a complete waste of time in 2025. And I want to say right in the beginning of this video, this is going to be a very devil's advocate video. I've done a lot of videos about, is driving worth it? Because a lot of people want to know, is it even worth it to sign up as a driver? And there are some positives. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Uber and Lyft is incredibly bad, but things have been getting worse. And in this video, I just want to talk about the 5 biggest reasons why, in general, in this year, if I had to look at it from a very pessimistic perspective, it's just not worth it. Number 1, the pay. This is by far the biggest thing. When you factor in all the elements I'm going to be talking about in this video, and there's a lot to them. There's a lot of elements I'm going to talk about in this video that you probably have never even heard of or thought about or even realized, especially if you've not driven yet. But the biggest thing is the pay. Drivers do not get paid at all what they should be getting paid. And there's a lot of unfortunate factors behind this. Now, 10 years ago is the first time I started driving. And 10 years ago, the average I made was about 20 to 25 an hour. And that was pretty good. 10 years ago, 20 to 25 an hour, I might even lean and say closer to 25 an hour was pretty good. When I was driving in Boston, and like I say, it was the winter time, I could sometimes make, and I'm not exaggerating, from $35 up to $60 an hour. And here's the bigger thing, Uber and Lyft at that time only took out a 20% cut. If I made $100, they get $20, I get $80. I was fine with that. I'm like, that makes sense. They find me the people, they made the apps, fine. Now that's not the case. I've heard of a lot of drivers saying now it does fluctuate area to area. This was kind of annoying. That not only are you getting paid less now per hour, if anything, I'd say the average hourly rate is probably closer to $20 to $22 an hour now, which is crazy because when you factor in inflation, you're like, wait a minute. So it's been 10 years, inflation's gotten worse, yet Uber and Lyft drivers are making less per hour. I'd say about 20 to 22 if I had to be ultra specific. But not only that, Uber and Lyft is taking out a bigger cut. So let's say if someone goes out and drives, and it does depend, like I said, area to area, location to location, it might be about close to half or 40 or 50%. So someone goes out and drives, and let's say they drive for an hour, they make $20, they're really walking away with $10. $10 an hour isn't the craziest amount. When you factor in a lot of other factors regarding your car, the insurance issues, the liability, taxes as well, there's so many different things that come into play with this. And that's why a lot of drivers are quitting now. That's why a lot of drivers are quitting, saying, look, this is just not worth it at all anymore. Like, yes, the flexible schedule, that's great. The instant cash outs, can't beat it. But when I look at how much I'm really bringing home after factoring in how much money I made, minus Uber and Lyft's cut, minus all the expenses, maintenance, depreciation, on like all these different things, I'm walking away with very little, which leads me to number 2, other alternatives. This is a big one where, from my perspective, right now in 2025, I'm like, honestly, Uber and Lyft is a complete waste of time. Again, I am being very pessimistic on this video. I want to say that. There are a lot of benefits to being a driver. Maybe I'll do like a follow-up video to talk about the yin and yang of being a driver. But one big thing I really have to stress is that when you look at other jobs, a lot of them are just way better when you look at the benefits. Now, like I said, 10 years ago, to make $25 an hour whenever I wanted, not bad. Now, though, to make $20 to $22 an hour, like I said, with the pay, and Uber and Lyft taking out a bigger cut, and maintenance on your car is more expensive, gas is more expensive, etc. I'm like, wait a minute. In-and-out worker, for example, here in LA, this is a big example I use, it makes about $22 to $23 an hour. Almost the exact same as an Uber and Lyft driver. And part-time workers even get benefits with In-N-Out, and you get free food, and you don't really have maintenance on your car. You don't have to spend money in gas when you have to commute, but like, you get what I'm saying. I think that back in the day, Uber and Lyft was really in its own unique category. Like the gig economy, if I'd word like that, didn't really exist. You had freelancing, but I feel like I look at, maybe I'm splitting hairs here, but I look at the freelance world and the gig economy as 2 separate things. There's a lot of interconnectedness between them, like a Venn diagram if you look at it like that. But I do look at them as separate things. And I think Uber and Lyft really kind of kicked it off. But now in 2025, there are so many other better alternatives that have all the same benefits of Uber and Lyft without any of the negative downsides. I have a video listed below in the description. It was like an hour-long video that I filmed, a tremendous amount of research. And we talked about 15 different gig economy jobs that are very similar to Uber and Lyft that pay more and they're better, right? So I suggest watching that video if you do want to get into some gig economy type work or get another job or whatever. Because I'm like, wait a minute. Back in the day, you kind of only had Uber and Lyft and it was way better to drive back in the day. Now though, there are so many other better alternatives. Number 3, the liability. This is such a massive one. As you can imagine, the more that you're on the road, the more likely you are to get into an accident. Like say some dispute to happen with a passenger. This is why I suggest make sure you have rideshare insurance, which is extra insurance on top of your auto insurance. And as you can imagine, this is going to cost you more money. In addition, get a dash cam. I will say, I think even if you're not driving for Uber and Lyft, you should have a dash cam. They've saved a lot of people in a lot of situations. They're very inexpensive now. Definitely suggest getting one as well. Definitely get a dash cam, right? I've been like listed below on Amazon to like their listings. Some of them are like 30 or 40 bucks, right? Very, very inexpensive. Definitely suggest doing that. But the liability is pretty high. In addition, when you look at things like deactivation, which in case you didn't know is a big thing with Uber and Lyft, sometimes Uber and Lyft will target somebody that, like say, gets wrongfully accused of something and says, you know what, we're taking down your account. You can't drive anymore. And you're like, wait a minute. I was planning on driving and I was, relying on this money. I drive all the time and I drive to put food on the table, make ends meet, etc. Now I can't drive. What am I going to do? And deactivation is a huge issue with Uber and Lyft. There's so much liability that comes with it. And I think that the issue is when you look at, to use a business term, the ROI, the return on your investment, you're like, wait a minute. So I'm going to get paid very, very little when you factor in the average hourly rate, and of course, expenses, maintenance, the cut that Uber and Lyft takes. I'm going to be not making that much money, very, very little money. And then on top of that, the liability that I incur as a rideshare driver is insanely high. Not worth it at all. Number 4, expenses. Now, like I mentioned in a lot of points throughout this video already, there are a lot of expenses to being a driver. One, I might as well include it. And if I count it, you could argue the cut that Uber and Lyft takes. That's annoying. But also paying for gas constantly. More maintenance on your car. In addition, depreciation on your car. Like let's say you drive for Uber and Lyft. You put on, and I'm making things up, 10,000 miles on your car. And let's say you stop driving. But when you go to resell your car, that car is going to be worth less because there's 10,000 extra miles that exist that wouldn't exist if you didn't drive for Uber and Lyft. In addition, a lot of dealerships now, like if you go to sell your car, one of the first things they ask you is, has this car ever been done or driven for or used in a taxi or rideshare service like Uber and Lyft? They will give you less money for your car, potentially, because of that reason. In addition, just your car stopping working. The more wear and tear and the more you beat your car down from driving, especially like say if you're in a city doing those like hard miles of stop and go, if you think about it, in those instances, I mean, you're talking about your car potentially not being able to run anymore, getting more oil changes, getting more just general work done, fixing your brakes, the list goes on and on. There's a lot that you have to pay for. And then not to mention, and I might as well mention this, taxes. A lot of people are not used to the fact that when you're a driver, you're an independent contractor. And as a result, you're talking about owing money to the IRS at the end of the year, not money being taken out paycheck to paycheck. If you're, let's say, not good at accounting, not good at keeping track of your finances, this can really bite you in the butt. And I want to stress, I'm a former accountant, but I'm not your accountant. Always like to mention that. But this could really bite you in the butt later on. Not the position you want to be in. Not the position you want to be in at all, right? And I think that that's kind of the unfortunate thing with Uber and Lyft that, like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to other alternatives, it's like, wait a minute, take an in-and-out worker, a lot of benefits. There's some similarities if you look at the pricing, but then it's like, you don't have to incur all these expenses. With Uber and Lyft, you 100% have to spend money in order to make money. And that really starts to add up and really decreases how much you're really walking away with. Number 5, lack of rides. This is one that is becoming a lot more prevalent, especially in 2025. I've mentioned this even like last year in 2024, that what's happening is there are more people taking Ubers and Lyfts than ever before. This is true. Every month, there's more and more Uber and Lyft rides happening. That's great. On the other end, there are more and more drivers signing up every month, which seems like good. You're like, more rides, more drivers. But the rate of there being more drivers is way higher than the rate of there being more passengers. And in case you didn't know, the peak hours are about 7 to 9 a.m., 5 to 7 p.m., Friday and Saturday nights. What that means, that's the time you're gonna make the most amount of money, referred to as the peak hours, the best times to drive. Most people know this is kind of like Uber and Lyft 101. But the tricky thing is, because there's so many drivers on the road now, and a lot of them want to make money, I mean, who wouldn't? And make good money, who wouldn't? A lot of them are driving during the peak hours. And I've interviewed a lot of drivers who said, yeah, you know, it's kind of tricky on a Friday night when I make the most amount of money. It's kind of hard to find a ride now. There's so many drivers on the road, too little rides to go around. And I've had so many drivers tell me, and I've read articles about this too, and I've covered them on this channel, that some drivers are saying, yeah, I'm now working almost double to make less what I was making last year. And there are other factors, right? The pay has gotten worse. The cut's gotten higher from Uber and Lyft. Like I said, expenses on your car and all this kind of stuff have gotten higher, but also it's just harder and harder now to get a ride. There's only a limited amount of rides to really go around. And yes, I will say in certain cities, this might not be as applicable to you, but in, like, say, smaller areas with, like, not as dense of a population, this is having a huge impact. And I've gotten a lot of comments on this channel, people saying, yeah, Mark, I'm not gonna lie, I just don't know if it's worth it to drive anymore. I'm already making little money. I'm already struggling to make money with Uber and Lyft per ride, but now I can't even get rides because there's so many drivers on the road. Why drive? And now a bonus point of why Uber and Lyft is just not worth it and a complete waste of time is Waymo and self-driving cars. Now, I want to say this. We are still in the infancy of not only self-driving cars, but self-driving taxis / self-driving ride shares. Right now, at least the exact time of this video, Waymo's, which is a self-driving car, you order it, similar to ordering an Uber and Lyft on an app and everything, is only in LA, San Francisco, and Phoenix. Only 3 places. Later this year, they're going to be introduced into Atlanta and also Austin, maybe some other places, but we'll have to see. And I do want to mention this because in 2025, this is the first year where it could start to become a concern. Now, when people ask me, what are the best places to drive? Because in case you didn't know, your location is the #1 factor that determines how much money you can make as a driver. And I typically say major cities, Vegas, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego's actually up there. I'm going to say Boston as well. The list goes on and on. But I got to be honest, if you're here in LA, if let's say you're here in San Francisco or north of me, because I'm in LA right now, it's starting to become a concern. Because as you can imagine, a lot of people, typically, when it comes to ordering a ride, say, pull up Uber, pull up Lyft. Which one's cheaper? I'm going to take that one. But now, Waymo's getting a tremendous amount of attention. Before it was a wait list and all this kind of stuff. Now, anyone can download the app and drive with Waymo. Drive, if I word like that, but basically take a ride. And the crazy thing is, being honest, when it comes to Waymo, is sometimes it's actually cheaper. Waymo is getting cheaper and cheaper by the day. And this is something that I'd say, like I said earlier, in the past point, there's only a finite amount of rides to go around. And as you can imagine, there's too many drivers being on the road, which makes it harder for you to get a ride. But at least at the time of this video, if you're in LA, San Francisco, or Phoenix, and you're being a rideshare driver, if you think of all the rides happening in LA, Phoenix, and San Francisco, not only is it harder for you to get a ride now in 2025 because there's so many drivers on the road as human drivers, if I'd say it like that, but now you also kind of have to compete with Waymos and self-driving cars. I do think we are pretty far away from it being a massive, like, issue, at least here in America and all this kind of stuff. I think we're kind of far from that because you're talking about a lot of inventory. Anybody can just drive for the most part, unless your car doesn't qualify, but most cars do, I'll say. Most people will just use a car to drive for Uber and Lyft. But with Waymo, they have to make these specialty cars with the cameras and the technology. There's a lot of, as you can imagine, safety testing and liability testing, God forbid. So the inventory of Waymo, I think, is what's really holding it back. And I think we're still pretty far away from it being a huge issue in terms of, like, nationally, in terms of everywhere. But it is something that you should keep on your radar, especially, like I said, if you are a rideshare driver in LA, San Francisco, or Phoenix, and now as well Atlanta or Austin later this year. There's only a finite amount of rides to go around, and Waymo's now taking a cut of those rides.